During a funeral, a dog fixates on one guest. What it reveals left everyone terrified. The mournful notes of a distant bagpipe drift through the air as the small crowd gathers around the freshly turned earth. Sunlight spills over the graveyard, illuminating the faces of friends and family who stand in somber silence. At the center of it all, Max, a golden Labrador with deep-set eyes, shifts restlessly at the foot of Michael's casket. His tail, usually a metronome of joy, hangs low, quivering with an unease that is palpable even among the grieving. Suddenly, Max's head snaps up, ears perked, nostrils flaring. He locks his gaze on an unfamiliar figure, Sarah, a close family friend who stands at the edge of the gathering. She fidgets, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, but there's something in her posture that makes Max's muscles tense. He growls softly, a low rumble that vibrates through the hushed crowd, drawing glances of confusion and concern. "Max, come here," Michael's brother Tom calls, his voice strained with grief. But Max remains resolute, his body quivering with a primal instinct that runs deeper than the sorrow surrounding him. He inches closer to Sarah, hackles raised, eyes fixed with a ferocity that sends a shiver through those nearby. The whisper of the wind feels charged, as if the very atmosphere is aware of the unspoken tension. Max whines, a sound filled with more than just mourning. It's a warning. He claws at Sarah's shoes, a desperate plea ignited by an instinct he cannot articulate but feels in every fiber of his being. Sarah stumbles back, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. The crowd shifts uncomfortably, casting furtive glances between the dog and Sarah, exchanging murmurs laced with suspicion. Tom's brow furrows. "What's wrong with him?" he demands, stepping forward. The atmosphere thickens, the air heavy with unsaid words and buried truths. Max never acts like this. Max's focus intensifies, his growl deepening, a harbinger of something sinister lurking beneath the surface of their small-town facade. Michael's death was declared an accident, a tragic slip that left the community heartbroken. But here, in the tension of the funeral, questions begin to unfurl like the petals of a dark flower. As Sarah's gaze flickers to the gathered mourners, a flicker of panic ignites in her eyes. Memories of late-night conversations, hushed tones, and fleeting concerns surface in Tom's mind. Michael had confided in Sarah about threats he had received, casual mentions that now twist into a chilling reminder of the fragility of trust. "Sarah," Tom says, voice steady but taut, "what did Michael tell you?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with implications, as Max remains a sentinel at Sarah's feet, embodying the unyielding loyalty that transcends mere companionship. The shadows lengthen as the sun dips lower, casting an eerie glow around the graveyard. Max's growl quiets to a tense silence, but his eyes remain locked on Sarah, an unspoken accusation swirling in the air. What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of their grief? And what will Max's unwavering loyalty uncover about the ties that bind them all? The mournful notes of the distant bagpipe lingered in the crisp autumn air, wrapping around the small gathering like a shroud. As the sun dipped lower, the warm glow painted the scene in hues of gold and crimson, a stark contrast to the chill settling in the hearts of those who stood at the grave of Michael Hart, the town's beloved artist. Friends and family exchanged whispered condolences, their grief palpable, yet an undercurrent of tension began to weave through the crowd, sparked by the singular focus of Max, Michael's loyal Labrador. Max's deep-set eyes, usually bright and full of life, were clouded with confusion and instinct. He remained rooted, his gaze locked on Sarah, a family friend whose presence seemed to disrupt the very air around them. The way she fidgeted, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress, struck a chord of discomfort in Max. He remained at Michael's casket, fur bristling, a silent sentinel guarding against an unseen threat. "Max, come," Tom urged again, his voice rising above the murmur of the crowd, filled with a mixture of grief and desperation. Yet Max refused, inching closer to Sarah, who was now visibly shaken, her eyes darting between the dog and the other mourners. The growing crowd began to whisper, their concern morphing into something darker, something that hinted at buried secrets. "Why is he behaving like this?" Tom muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His mind raced, recalling the last few days before Michael's death, when the artist had seemed unusually anxious, his laughter tinged with an edge of fear. "What were you hiding, Michael?" Tom's thoughts spiraled, entangled with the memory of Michael's late-night calls to Sarah, their hushed tones carrying an urgency that felt all too foreboding now. Max, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, let out a low growl, a deep rumble that sent shivers through those nearby. The sound was not merely one of warning, it echoed with the weight of loyalty and an unshakable bond forged through years of companionship. He stepped forward, his paws steady against the cool earth, as if he sought to protect his late owner even now. The tension hung thick, a cloak of dread enveloping them as Sarah met Max's fierce gaze. With a sudden movement, she stumbled back, nearly losing her footing. I don't know what's wrong with him," she stammered, her voice breaking. Panic flared in her eyes, mirrored by the growing suspicion in the crowd. "Max, it's okay," she attempted to soothe, but her words fell flat against the weight of the moment. Tom's brow furrowed deep as he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Sarah, what did Michael tell you? You need to be honest." The question pierced the gathering like a knife, and silence blanketed the mourners, all ears straining for her response. Friends exchanged glances, a silent agreement forming among them to dissect Sarah's every movement, every word. I can't remember," she said, voice trembling. Yet, the way she cast her gaze downward, avoiding the eyes of those who once considered her a confidant, fueled the growing unease. The whispers that had accompanied the funeral turned into murmurs of accusation. "He mentioned something about threats," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, but it was enough to send a ripple through the crowd. Gasps echoed softly off the gravestones, and Max's growl intensified, resonating through the weighty silence. The revelation hung in the air, a dark cloud overshadowing the day's mourning. Tom's heart raced as he recalled the fleeting mentions Michael had made, how he had brushed off the threats as mere annoyances, the ramblings of an artist too sensitive to the world's harshness. But now, standing in the shadow of his brother's casket, those words felt like a chilling premonition. "Why didn't you say anything?" Tom pressed, his voice tinged with desperation. "If you knew he was in danger." The accusation hung between them, sharp and stinging. Max's attention remained locked on Sarah, his instincts honed, sensing the shifting tides of trust and betrayal. "I thought it was nothing. Just paranoia." Sarah's voice cracked, her fear now palpable. But in the depth of her eyes, something dark flickered, a hidden truth that seemed to slither just beneath the surface. Tom felt a surge of anger mixed with sorrow, grappling with the reality that someone he had known for years might be entangled in a web of deceit. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that felt like the fingers of the past reaching out, grasping at the present. Max's growl softened, but his gaze remained fixed, unwavering. In that moment, he wasn't just a grieving dog, he was the embodiment of unyielding loyalty, an instinctual guardian who sensed what the human heart often concealed. As the crowd shifted uneasily, a sense of dread seeped through the air. Secrets began to surface, each revelation threatening to unravel the delicate tapestry of relationships that had been woven over years. Tom felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, the need to protect not just Michael's legacy, but the truth lurking in the shadows of their grief. "Let's talk outside," Tom finally said, motioning for Sarah to follow. The group shifted, an invisible line drawn between loyalty and suspicion. Max moved with them, a silent protector, his instincts guiding him to where the truth might lead. As the gathering dispersed, the cool wind whispered through the graveyard, carrying with it a sense of foreboding, a promise that the day's revelations were only the beginning. The mournful notes of a distant bagpipe drift through the air as the small crowd gathers around the freshly turned earth. Sunlight spills over the graveyard, illuminating the faces of friends and family who stand in somber silence. At the center of it all, Max, a golden Labrador with deep-set eyes, shifts restlessly at the foot of Michael's casket. His tail, usually a metronome of joy, hangs low, quivering with an unease that is palpable even among the grieving. Suddenly, Max's head snaps up, ears perked, nostrils flaring. He locks his gaze on an unfamiliar figure, Sarah, a close family friend who stands at the edge of the gathering. She fidgets, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, but there's something in her posture that makes Max's muscles tense. He growls softly, a low rumble that vibrates through the hushed crowd, drawing glances of confusion and concern. "Max, come here," Michael's brother Tom calls, his voice strained with grief. But Max remains resolute, his body quivering with a primal instinct that runs deeper than the sorrow surrounding him. He inches closer to Sarah, hackles raised, eyes fixed with a ferocity that sends a shiver through those nearby. The whisper of the wind feels charged, as if the very atmosphere is aware of the unspoken tension. Max whines, a sound filled with more than just mourning, it's a warning. He claws at Sarah's shoes, a desperate plea ignited by an instinct he cannot articulate but feels in every fiber of his being. Sarah stumbles back, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. The crowd shifts uncomfortably, casting furtive glances between the dog and Sarah, exchanging murmurs laced with suspicion. Tom's brow furrows. "What's wrong with him?" he demands, stepping forward. The atmosphere thickens, the air heavy with unsaid words and buried truths. Max never acts like this. Max's focus intensifies, his growl deepening, a harbinger of something sinister lurking beneath the surface of their small-town facade. Michael's death was declared an accident, a tragic slip that left the community heartbroken. But here, in the tension of the funeral, questions begin to unfurl like the petals of a dark flower. As Sarah's gaze flickers to the gathered mourners, a flicker of panic ignites in her eyes. Memories of late-night conversations, hushed tones, and fleeting concerns surface in Tom's mind. Michael had confided in Sarah about threats he had received, casual mentions that now twist into a chilling reminder of the fragility of trust. "Sarah," Tom says, voice steady but taut, "what did Michael tell you?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with implications, as Max remains a sentinel at Sarah's feet, embodying the unyielding loyalty that transcends mere companionship. The shadows lengthen as the sun dips lower, casting an eerie glow around the graveyard. Max's growl quiets to a tense silence, but his eyes remain locked on Sarah, an unspoken accusation swirling in the air. What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of their grief? And what will Max's unwavering loyalty uncover about the ties that bind them all? Stern, Stern, Stern. The gathering began to disperse, each mourner retreating into their own thoughts, their shared sorrow now entwined with uncertainty. Tom stood staring at Sarah, his heart pounding. "We need to talk," he said, motioning for her to step away from the crowd. Max, sensing the tension, stayed close, his deep-set eyes boring into Sarah's every move. They walked toward the edge of the graveyard, the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet muted by the weight of the moment. Tom felt a knot tightening in his stomach, the need for answers battling against his grief. "Why didn't you tell us about the threats?" Tom pressed, his voice low but urgent. "Michael was scared. You must have known." "I didn't think it was serious," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "He mentioned some emails he received, but I thought they were just spam or pranksters." "Spam?" Tom echoed incredulously. "Michael was worried enough to confide in you. He trusted you." The anger bubbled beneath his grief, but he stifled it, searching her eyes for the truth. "I swear, I didn't know anything else." Sarah insisted, her hands trembling. "But there was something strange," she hesitated, glancing around as if fearing eavesdroppers, then lowered her voice. "He was working on something. A new project. He said it had to do with some local businesses. Something shady." Tom's interest peaked. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, Tom. He didn't go into detail. Just that someone was upset about a piece he was creating, something that could expose them." Her voice dipped to a whisper, fear etched on her face. "He was afraid. That's all I know." Max shifted, his attention unwavering. He sat between them, watching Sarah with an intensity that felt almost protective. Tom knelt down to the dog, seeking comfort in the familiar warmth. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. "What do you see?" As Sarah's eyes darted away, Max let out a low growl again, his body tense as if he were ready to spring. "Max, stop," Tom commanded, but the dog remained fixated on Sarah, as if he sensed something lurking beneath her skin. "Please," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to put him in danger. I didn't know." Tom studied her, weighing her words against the growing unease gnawing at his gut. "If he was working on something important, we need to find it. We need to know exactly what Michael was involved in." Sarah nodded, her expression shifting from fear to determination. "I have a key to his studio. Maybe we can find something there." With a shared sense of urgency, they moved toward Michael's art studio, a quaint building nestled on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a tangle of trees. The air felt thick with anticipation, the scent of damp earth mingling with the bittersweet aroma of fallen leaves. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the landscape, but the shadows seemed to deepen, whispering secrets that had yet to be uncovered. Entering the studio, the familiar chaos of brushes, canvases, and half-finished paintings enveloped them. The walls were adorned with vibrant colors, each stroke telling a story of life, love, and now, heartbreak. "Where should we start?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she flicked on the light, illuminating the cluttered space. Tom began to sift through the papers scattered across the desk, his heart racing. "Anything that seems out of place," he instructed. Anything that connects to the project he was working on. Suddenly, Max barked, his voice sharp and insistent. He darted toward a corner where a large canvas leaned against the wall, partially obscured by a stack of old art supplies. Tom followed the direction of Max's gaze, feeling a chill run down his spine. Is that? Sarah stepped closer, her breath catching. The canvas depicted a sprawling landscape of the town, but it was the dark figures lurking in the shadows that sent a jolt of dread through her. Max whined, nudging the edge of the canvas with his nose, urging Tom to pull it free. As Tom did, a folded piece of paper slipped out from behind it, landing at his feet. What's that? Sarah asked, her eyes wide as Tom knelt to retrieve it. It was a printed email, its subject line bold and alarming, "We know what you're doing." The message was explicit, filled with threats and veiled warnings about Michael's project, demanding he cease his work immediately or face dire consequences. Michael was onto something, Tom murmured, his stomach churning. He was in real danger. But as they read through the chilling message, a realization hit him. This wasn't just a warning. It was a threat aimed at silence. Max let out another growl, this time more urgent, and Tom turned to see Sarah's face pale. "What's wrong?" he asked, but before she could answer, the studio door swung open with a creak, and a figure stepped in. Looking for something? It was a voice laced with menace, and as Tom's heart raced, he realized the shadows had come alive, revealing a truth far darker than he could have imagined. As the figure stepped into the light, Max positioned himself protectively in front of Tom and Sarah, a growl rumbling deep in his throat, ready to defend against whatever danger had just entered their sanctuary. The stakes had never been higher, and the unraveling of Michael's mysterious death had only just begun. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden hue through the dust motes swirling in the air of Michael's art studio. The scent of paint and varnish mingled with the crisp autumn breeze that slipped through the open window. Tom and Sarah stood in the chaotic space, the tension between them palpable. Max, the golden Labrador, remained vigilant, his deep-set eyes darting between the two humans as they absorbed the implications of the email they had just uncovered. Michael was onto something, Tom breathed, his fingers trembling as he held the printed email. The words "We know what you're doing" echoed ominously in his mind, intertwining with the painful memories of his brother's laughter, now overshadowed by this dark revelation. What does it mean? Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she peered over Tom's shoulder. Who would threaten him like this? I don't know, Tom replied, his throat tight. But we need to find out. This isn't just a warning, it's a threat aimed to silence him. He felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders, the realization that Michael's death was more than a tragic accident. It was a sinister plot woven into the fabric of their small town. As he tried to make sense of the situation, Max let out a low growl, causing both Tom and Sarah to turn sharply. The dog's body was tense, and he stood as a sentinel, watching the door with unwavering focus. Tom's heart raced as he realized the danger they might be in. Max, stay, Tom commanded, but the dog remained fixed, his instincts guiding him to protect his owner's family. Just then, a creaking sound echoed through the studio as the door swung open. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the fading light. The tension in the air thickened, and Tom's blood ran cold as he recognized the familiar face of David, a local contractor with a reputation for being involved in questionable dealings. Looking for something? David asked, his voice smooth but laced with a threat. He leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips that sent a chill down Tom's spine. What are you doing here? Tom demanded, his voice steady but low, masking the urgency that pulsed through him. I could ask you the same, David replied, stepping further into the room, his demeanor a stark contrast to the somberness that had enveloped the studio moments before. Tom felt a surge of anger. You need to leave, he said, positioning himself between David and Sarah, who stood frozen in fear. Now, David said, feigning innocence. I just wanted to pay my respects to Michael. I heard about the funeral. Such a tragedy. He paused, his gaze shifting to Max, who stood defiantly in front of Tom and Sarah, growling softly. And such a loyal dog you have there. But you know, loyalty can be a double-edged sword. What do you mean by that? Tom demanded, his heart racing. David chuckled, the sound devoid of warmth. Let's just say, loyalty can lead you down some dangerous paths. And sometimes, it's better to keep your nose out of things that don't concern you. His eyes flicked to the email still clutched in Tom's hand, recognition dawning. I see you found something of interest. Tom's chest tightened at the implication. You know something about this, don't you? He pressed. You're involved in whatever Michael was working on. David feigned surprise, though the glint in his eyes betrayed him. Oh, I'm just a contractor. I build things, I don't break them. But Michael was an artist, wasn't he? Always trying to unveil the truth, to dig deeper. That kind of curiosity can get you into trouble. Tom's mind raced as he recalled the conversations he had overheard between Michael and David in the past. Michael had been working on a project that involved local businesses, and it was no secret that David had dealings with some of the town's more unscrupulous characters. What was Michael really working on? Tom pressed, his voice rising with urgency. David shrugged, a mock gesture of indifference. Just a little art piece, I'm sure. But you know how art can be. Sometimes it reveals more than the artist intends. Max's growl intensified, and Tom could feel the tension in the air, thickening like an impending storm. You need to leave now, David, Tom warned, his voice low and threatening. Sure, Tom. But remember, the more you dig, the more dirt you'll find. And sometimes, it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. With that, David turned, his smirk lingering as he walked out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. As the door clicked shut, Tom felt a rush of adrenaline. What was he talking about? Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know, but I think we've stumbled onto something big, Tom replied, his heart racing. Michael was afraid for a reason, and David knows more than he's letting on. We need to figure out what Michael was working on and why it put him in danger. Max whined, stepping closer to Tom, sensing his agitation. Tom knelt down, stroking the dog's fur as the realization washed over him. You were right to warn us, buddy. We need your instincts now more than ever. The room felt charged with unspoken truths, and as Tom glanced back at the canvas leaning against the wall, he caught a glimpse of the dark figures hidden in the painting, figures that seemed to loom closer with every passing moment. Let's check the other canvases, Tom suggested, rising to his feet, determination coursing through him. There might be more clues here. They moved through the studio, the vibrant colors of the paintings contrasting sharply with the grim atmosphere. Each canvas they examined seemed to hold hidden meanings, layers of Michael's thoughts and emotions that spoke of his fears and passions. Look at this one, Sarah said, pointing to a painting of the town square. There's a figure in the background. It looks like David. Tom leaned closer, his heart pounding. And here, he said, gesturing to another canvas depicting a shadowy figure lurking behind a tree. This isn't just art, it's a message. Max barked, his attention focused on a pile of canvases stacked in the corner. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, a sense of urgency spurring them on. Let's see what's back there. They pulled the canvases away, revealing a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside lay a stack of folders, the edges yellowed with age. Tom's hands shook as he reached for them, pulling out the first file. The label read Project Transparency. As he flipped through the documents, his breath hitched. These are notes from Michael about his project. He was documenting illegal activities in the town. There are names here, connections to businesses, and Tom's voice trailed off as he scanned a list that made his blood run cold. David's name is on this list. Sarah gasped, her hand covering her mouth. He was trying to expose them. Exactly, Tom said, piecing the fragments together. Michael was deeper than we realized. He was afraid, and for good reason. This isn't just about art, it's about corruption. Max whined softly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Tom stroked his fur, his heart heavy with the realization that Michael had been standing at the edge of a dark abyss, and now they were drawn into it too. Now we know what we're up against, Tom said, determination igniting within him. We have to take this to the authorities. They need to know what's happening in this town. But as they prepared to leave, Tom's mind raced with the implications of their discovery. If David was connected to this corruption, what would he do to silence them? The stakes had risen, and the danger was no longer just a shadow. It was a palpable threat that loomed over them. Stay close, Max, Tom said, a sense of resolve filling him. We're going to get to the bottom of this, for Michael. As they stepped out into the fading light, the air felt electric with tension. The truth was no longer hidden. It was a living entity, breathing down their necks, urging them forward into the darkness. The investigation had only just begun, and with Max as their loyal guide, They would uncover the secrets buried beneath the surface of their small-town life. Little did they know, the real danger was yet to come, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The dim light of the studio flickered ominously as Tom flipped through the files, his heart pounding with every new revelation. The air was thick with tension, and Max, ever vigilant, remained at his side, eyes darting toward the door as if sensing unseen threats lurking just beyond the threshold. "Look at this," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper as he pulled out another folder labeled Community Connections. He opened it, revealing a series of photographs. The images captured small-town gatherings, local business owners smiling for the camera, and a few less than innocent moments, exchanges between familiar faces that spoke of backdoor dealings and hushed conversations. But it was the last photo that made Tom's breath hitch. "Sarah, come here," he called, urgency lacing his tone. She leaned in, her eyes widening as she recognized the man in the photo. It was David, shaking hands with a figure obscured in shadow, a prominent local politician, the same man who had been present at the funeral. "Why is David with him?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she took a step back, the implications crashing down around them. "I don't know, but it looks like Michael was onto something much bigger than we realized." Tom's mind raced, connecting the dots like a jigsaw puzzle, revealing a sinister picture. This isn't just about art, it's about corruption that runs deep in this town. As they stood in the studio, the weight of their discovery threatened to crush them. Michael had been documenting a network of deceit, and in doing so, he had put himself in the crosshairs of those who would do anything to protect their secrets. The email threats, now illuminated by this new context, took on a chilling significance. "Tom, if Michael was exposing them, they might have wanted to silence him," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "And now they know we have his notes." Max let out a low growl, his instincts kicking into overdrive. Tom felt a cold sweat trickle down his back as he glanced at the door. "We need to get out of here," he said, urgency propelling him forward. "We can't stay in the open like this." As they gathered the folders, a sudden noise echoed from outside, a car engine revving, tires screeching against gravel. Tom's heart raced. "They're coming for us," he said, adrenaline surging. "We have to go now." With Max leading the way, they rushed through the side door, slipping into the shadows of the forest that bordered the studio. Tom's mind raced, piecing together the implications of their discovery. "If David is involved with the politician, then this goes all the way to the top," he muttered, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. "They'll do anything to protect their interests." As they moved deeper into the trees, the leaves crunched beneath their feet, masking their hurried escape. The serene beauty of the autumn landscape was starkly contrasted by the fear that gripped Tom and Sarah. They needed a plan, but first, they had to find safety. "Where do we go?" Sarah asked, glancing back toward the studio, her breath coming in quick gasps. "There's an old cabin up ahead," Tom replied, recalling the place he had spent childhood summers. "It's been abandoned for years. We can hide there and figure out our next move." Max led the way, his instincts sharp as they navigated through the underbrush, every rustle in the leaves echoing the threat that loomed behind them. Tom's mind raced, trying to connect the pieces of the puzzle. The corruption, the threats, Michael's death. It was all linked, and they had stumbled onto a dangerous game that could cost them everything. As they reached the cabin, Tom pushed the door open, a cloud of dust swirling around them. The interior was dark, the air stale, but it offered a refuge from the outside world. "We'll stay here for now," he said, his voice steady. "We need to regroup and come up with a plan." Max sniffed the air, his ears perked, ever alert. As Tom leaned against a wall, he felt the weight of the folders pressing against him, the evidence of Michael's courage and the danger it now posed. They were standing on the precipice of something monumental, but with every revelation, the stakes rose higher. "Tom," Sarah said, her voice breaking the silence as she rifled through one of the folders. "There's something else." Her fingers trembled as she pulled out another document, this one marked with a bold red stamp, "Confidential." "What is it?" Tom asked, his heart racing as he crossed the dim room to see. As she unfolded the paper, Sarah's eyes widened further. "It's a list of names, people who were involved in the same project Michael was documenting. And look, David's name is here, but so is someone else's," she said, her voice shaking as she pointed to a name that sent shockwaves through Tom's system. "His brother's name, Michael's brother?" Tom's mind whirled, disbelief crashing over him like a wave. "Tom, this isn't just about David. This implicates your family." The revelation struck like a lightning bolt, illuminating the darkness surrounding them. Tom's understanding shattered into pieces. He had thought he was uncovering a conspiracy targeting Michael, but now it felt personal. His own family was entangled in this web of deceit, and the very people he had trusted could be complicit in the danger they faced. Why would Michael's brother be involved? Tom stammered, confusion and betrayal swirling within him. How could he do this? "I don't know," Sarah said, her eyes brimming with fear. "But if he's involved, it changes everything. We need to confront him. He might have answers, or he could be the one behind it all." Tom felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but beneath it lay a deep well of fear for Michael's legacy and the truth that needed to be uncovered. "We can't let them silence us," he said, determination igniting within him. "We owe it to Michael to find out what really happened." Max whined softly, nudging Tom's hand, grounding him amidst the chaos of emotions. Tom took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Let's get the evidence to the authorities. We'll confront my brother together." As they stepped back into the fading light of the day, the forest around them felt alive with possibilities, both dangerous and hopeful. The stakes had escalated, and the path ahead was fraught with peril, but they had each other and a loyal dog by their side. With the truth in their hands and Max leading the way, they would uncover the secrets that lay buried within their small town, no matter the cost. The revelations had transformed their understanding of the past, and now it was time to face the present, and the darkness that awaited them. As Tom and Sarah stepped out of the cabin, the fading daylight painted long shadows across the forest floor, a stark reminder of the darkness that threatened to engulf them. Max darted ahead, his nose to the ground, but the dog's instincts weren't just about tracking, they were about sensing danger that loomed beyond the trees. "We need to move quickly," Tom said, his voice low but urgent. "I don't know how long we have before David, or worse my brother, figures out what we know." Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of determination and fear. "What do we do once we find him?" Tom's mind raced as they navigated through the underbrush, branches scraping against their clothing. "We confronted him. We need answers about Michael's death and what he's involved in. If he's implicated in this network, we can't let him silence us, or the truth." "Do you really think he had something to do with it?" Sarah asked, glancing back at the cabin one last time. "That's a huge accusation." Tom clenched his jaw, the weight of the revelation heavy on his heart. His brother had always been the anchor of their family, the one who kept everything together. "I don't want to believe it," he admitted, "but the evidence doesn't lie. If he's involved in this corruption, we need to expose him, before it's too late." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deep twilight over the forest. Shadows danced among the trees, and an eerie silence enveloped them, amplifying the sound of their footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. Tom's heart raced, the rush of adrenaline pushing him forward, yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. They emerged onto a narrow gravel road that wound its way through the woods, leading back toward town. As they walked, the weight of the folders felt heavier in Tom's hands, a physical manifestation of the burden he carried. Each document was a piece of Michael's legacy, a testament to the artist's bravery and the dark secrets he had uncovered. "We need to find a way to get this evidence into the right hands," Sarah said, her voice steady. "The police should be alerted right away. They need to investigate this corruption before it escalates." Tom nodded, but uncertainty clouded his thoughts. What if we can't trust them? What if David has connections there too? Max halted abruptly, his ears perked up and his body tense, drawing Tom's attention. "What is it, boy?" Tom asked, instinctively shifting into a protective stance beside Sarah. The sound of an engine rumbled in the distance, growing closer. Tom's heart raced as he turned to see headlights piercing through the trees, illuminating the gravel road. "We need to hide," he urged, pulling Sarah into the brush just as a dark SUV rolled into view, slowing as it approached the cabin. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the vehicle. "It's David," he hissed, panic surging through him. "He's looking for us." As the SUV came to a stop, David stepped out, scanning the area with an unsettling confidence. His posture was relaxed, but the tension in his jaw told a different story. "Tom," he called out, the casual tone a deceptive mask over the threat that lingered beneath. "You can't run from this forever." "What does he want?" Sarah whispered, eyes wide with fear. Tom clenched his fists, the anger boiling within him. "He's trying to intimidate us. We can't let him get to us." David began walking toward the cabin, his footsteps slow and deliberate. You think you can just waltz in and take what's not yours? You have no idea what you're getting into. Tom felt a surge of determination. We're not afraid of you, David, he yelled back, stepping out from behind the trees, Sarah beside him, Max growling at their feet. David's eyes narrowed, a smug smile creeping onto his face. Oh, but you should be. You've stumbled upon something much bigger than you realize. And trust me, you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Why don't you tell us what you really mean? Tom shot back, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Why was Michael really killed? David's expression darkened, the mask of confidence slipping. You really think you can expose me? You have no idea how deep this goes. You're playing a dangerous game, Tom. This isn't just about you or your brother. It's about power. Tom felt his heart race, the urgency of the moment pressing down on him like a weight. We have the evidence, David. We know what you're involved in, and we're going to the authorities. Max barked, his growl deepening, sensing the rising tension. Tom reached down, reassuring the dog that they were in this together. David took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You think you can just expose me? You'll regret this. The truth is a powerful weapon, Tom, but it can also be a double-edged sword. You might just end up cutting yourself. Tom's resolve hardened. I won't let you intimidate me. You've already taken too much from us. As David laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees, Tom could feel the countdown begin. The stakes were higher than ever, and with the sun setting, it felt like they were racing against the darkness closing in around them. Suddenly, a shattering noise broke the tension, glass breaking, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps rushing through the woods. We need to go now. Tom shouted, adrenaline surging as he realized they were no longer alone. With no time to waste, they turned and sprinted deeper into the forest, Max leading the way as the sounds of pursuit echoed behind them. The urgency fueled their escape, and as branches whipped against their faces, Tom's heart raced with the realization that the truth they sought was worth fighting for, even if it meant facing the darkness that threatened to consume them. Tom. Sarah shouted, breathless as they ran. What's the plan? We can't just keep running. We find a place to regroup, Tom replied, glancing back at the encroaching shadows. We need to decide whether to confront my brother or go directly to the authorities. But we can't let David catch up to us. The path ahead twisted into a thicket of trees, and Tom felt the weight of their situation bearing down on him. With every step, the danger grew closer, the stakes rising as he grappled with the choices that lay before him. As they burst through the underbrush and into a small clearing, Tom felt a moment of clarity. This is it, he said, panting as he turned to Sarah. We confront him. We have to find out where his loyalties lie, and if he's been involved in this conspiracy, we'll make him tell the truth. Sarah nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. And if he's not involved? Then we go to the police with the evidence we have, Tom said firmly. But I need to know if I can trust him. He's family. As they caught their breath, Max sniffed the air, his instincts still sharp. Tom felt the weight of their choices pressing down on him, a heavy burden that now felt insurmountable. But with the urgency of the moment pushing them forward, he knew they had to act before it was too late. Let's go, Tom said, resolving the hardening in his chest. For Michael. With Max leading the way, they set off toward the town, ready to confront the shadows lurking within their own family. The clock was ticking, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting a pale glow over the small town of Maplewood as Tom and Sarah maneuvered through the dense underbrush, Max leading the way with an unwavering sense of purpose. They had come too far to turn back now. The weight of Michael's legacy rested heavily on their shoulders. Tom, Sarah said, her voice nearly lost in the rustle of leaves. Are you sure about this? Confronting your brother could put us in more danger. Tom's heart pounded in his chest, uncertainty gnawing at him. I need to know where he stands. If he's involved in this, if he's been hiding something from me, then I have to confront him. I can't let Michael's death be in vain. They emerged into a clearing, the moonlight illuminating the old family home, its silhouette a stark reminder of the memories they had shared. Tom's pulse quickened, anxiety coursing through him. This is it, he whispered, looking at Sarah. We either find the truth or risk losing everything. As they approached the front door, the air felt thick with tension. Tom hesitated, memories flooding back, the laughter, the warmth of family gatherings, the bond he shared with his brother. But now, those memories were tainted with suspicion. "Max, stay close," Tom instructed, his voice firm but low as he pushed the door open. It creaked, echoing in the stillness. The familiar scent of home enveloped him, but it felt foreign now, the shadows lurking in every corner. "Tom!" a voice called from the living room, filled with an easy familiarity that made Tom's stomach churn. It was his brother, Jake. "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," Tom replied, stepping inside with Sarah and Max at his side. "We need to talk." Jake appeared, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "More like a monster," Tom said, his voice steady yet edged with urgency. "I found some things Michael was working on." "What things?" Jake asked, brow furrowing. Tom exchanged a glance with Sarah, the unspoken weight of their discovery hanging in the air. He was documenting corruption in the town. "I found evidence implicating David and your name too." Jake's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. "My Name?" "Tom, that's ridiculous. I had nothing to do with any of this." "Then explain why your name was on that list," Tom pressed, his heart racing. "Why you didn't tell me anything when I asked about Michael's fears." "Because I didn't know." Jake shot back, frustration rising in his voice. Michael was always paranoid about his art. He thought everyone was out to get him. "I didn't think it was serious." Tom felt the anger bubbling beneath his skin. "You should have taken him seriously. There's a lot at stake here, and if you really didn't know, then why were you so close with David?" "Tom, I can't control who I work with." Jake replied, his voice rising. "David's a contractor. I've done jobs for him, but that doesn't mean I'm involved in anything illegal." "Then prove it." Tom shouted, the frustration boiling over. "Show me you're not part of this. We need to know where you stand." Max growled softly, sensing the rising tension. Tom knelt beside him, feeling a surge of loyalty from the dog that mirrored the turmoil within him. "Tom, stop." Sarah interjected, placing a hand on his arm. "We can't make accusations without proof. We need to listen." Tom took a deep breath, trying to rein in his emotions. "Fine. But if you're not involved, then you won't mind helping us figure this out." Jake's expression hardened, a mix of anger and hurt. "You think I'd betray my own brother? You think I'd allow Michael to be in danger if I knew about it?" "Then what happened?" Tom demanded, pain lacing his voice. "Why didn't you protect him? Why didn't you tell me anything at all?" Jake's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him as he glanced away. "I didn't know how serious it was. Michael was always secretive about his work. I thought he could handle it." Tom's heart sank, the weight of betrayal heavy in the air. "You could have tried harder. You could have been there for him." "I was there." Jake shot back, pain flashing in his eyes. "I was his brother. I cared about him. But he pushed me away. He was so obsessed with his art, so caught up in whatever he thought he was doing, that he didn't see how dangerous it was." The silence that followed was deafening, the reality settling heavily between them. Tom's resolve faltered as he stared at his brother, the anguish in Jake's eyes reflecting his own. "You should have trusted me. You should have told me everything." "I didn't want to burden you," Jake replied, voice straining. "I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Tom echoed incredulously. "By letting me walk into this blind? By letting Michael die without a fight?" Jake's expression crumpled, and for a moment, Tom saw the brother he had grown up with, the one who had always stood by his side. "I'm sorry," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I never wanted this to happen." Max whined, nudging Tom's hand, grounding him amidst the turmoil. Tom took a step back, the anger dissipating as his heart ached for his brother. "We need to make this right," he said, voice low but firm. "We need to go to the authorities and tell them everything we know." "Together?" Jake asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Tom hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy. "If you're truly innocent, then yes. But if you're hiding something, if you're part of this, I can't protect you." Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll prove it to you. I'll help you find the truth about Michael's death and expose David. but we need to act fast." With a shared sense of purpose, they moved toward the door, Max leading the way. The tension that had once threatened to tear them apart now ignited a spark of hope. As they stepped outside, the cool night air enveloped them, and the moon shone brightly above, illuminating the path ahead. Tom's heart raced with the possibilities, the stakes higher than ever as they prepared to confront the darkness that had claimed Michael. But as they made their way back toward town, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, shadows lurking just out of sight. The cost of their decisions loomed heavy, and with every step, the weight of the truth pressed down on them, urging them forward into the unknown. In the end, they were bound by blood and betrayal, and the choices they made would determine not only their fates but the legacy of the brother they had lost. As they approached the police station, Tom felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, a burden he was willing to carry for the sake of justice and the memory of Michael. With Max at their side, they were ready to face whatever came next, united by the truth and the loyalty that had guided them through the darkness. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the small town of Maplewood as Tom, Sarah, and Max approached the police station. Each step felt heavier than the last, laden with the enormity of the truth they bore and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The air was thick with tension, vibrating with the weight of their decisions. Tom glanced at Sarah, her expression a mixture of resolve and apprehension. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her shoulders squared. "I have to be. Michael deserves justice." Max walked beside them, his body attuned to the undercurrents of their emotions. Tom could feel the dog's loyalty radiating as they moved, a reminder that, despite the darkness that surrounded them, they were not alone. As they reached the station, Tom's heart raced. Memories of childhood flooded back, moments of innocence overshadowed by the weight of betrayal. The bright lights of the building shone down on them like a beacon, illuminating the path to redemption. Yet, the fear of what they might uncover lingered in the corners of his mind. "Let's go in," Tom urged, pushing open the heavy door. The familiar scent of coffee and papers greeted them, but the atmosphere felt charged with urgency. Officer Daniels, a longtime family friend, looked up from his desk, surprise etched across his face. "Tom? Sarah?" he asked, concern furrowing his brow. "What's wrong?" "We need to talk," Tom replied, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "It's about Michael." Officer Daniels nodded, gesturing for them to sit. "What about him?" Tom took a deep breath, the weight of the folders pressing against him like a lead weight. He was working on something important, something dangerous. "We found evidence of corruption in the town, and it's connected to David and," he hesitated, locking eyes with Sarah before continuing. "My brother, Jake." Officer Daniels' expression turned serious as he leaned forward. "What do you mean connected? How do you know this?" Sarah pulled the documents from her bag, laying them on the desk. "These are notes Michael compiled. He was documenting illegal activities, and we found his name alongside David's. We think they were involved in something much larger than we realized." Shock flickered across Officer Daniels' face as he sifted through the papers. "This is serious. If what you're saying is true, we need to act quickly." Tom felt a surge of adrenaline, the urgency of the moment propelling him forward. "We have to investigate this now. Michael's death wasn't an accident. Someone wanted him silenced." Max whined softly, sensing the tension in the room. Tom knelt beside him, grounding himself in the presence of his loyal companion. "We can't let them get away with this," he said, looking up at Officer Daniels. "Not after everything Michael did for this town." "Agreed," Officer Daniels replied, his tone resolute. "I'll bring in my team. We'll need to question Jake and David, but we'll also need your cooperation. Are you ready for what that might mean?" Tom hesitated, fear clawing at his chest. Confronting his brother felt like stepping into a minefield, each step fraught with danger. "Yes," he said finally, his voice steady. "But if Jake is involved, I need to know the truth." As Officer Daniels made a call to his team, Tom felt a wave of conflicting emotions crash over him. The bond he shared with Jake had always been a source of strength in his life, but now that very bond felt like a fracture threatening to shatter everything he held dear. "Tom," Sarah said softly, reaching out to him, "whatever happens, we'll face it together." He nodded, grateful for her presence. "We have to believe that there's still hope for him, that he can come through this." Minutes later, the door swung open, and two officers stepped in. "We're ready," Officer Daniels said, his expression serious. "Let's bring them in." As they walked out into the cool night air, Tom's heart raced. The stakes had never been higher, and the path to justice felt fraught with uncertainty. They arrived at his family home, the familiar structure looming before him like a fortress. Tom's stomach churned at the thought of confronting Jake, but he steeled himself, knowing there was no turning back. Inside, Jake sat on the couch, his face pale as he looked up at the officers entering the room. "What's going on?" he asked, confusion turning to fear as he noticed Tom's tense expression. "Jake, we need to talk," Tom said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "It's about Michael." "I know," Jake replied, anguish etched across his features. "I didn't want to believe it. I thought he was just being paranoid." "Paranoid or not, he was working to expose something serious," Tom said, his voice rising. "And your name is on the list of people involved. We need the truth." Jake's eyes widened, disbelief coursing through him. "I swear I didn't know. I was just trying to help him." "Help him?" Tom shot back, frustration boiling over. "You let him walk into danger without warning him. How can I trust you?" "Because I'm your brother, Tom." Jake cried, desperation in his voice. "I loved Michael. I never wanted this to happen." The tension in the room crackled like electricity, each word igniting old wounds. But beneath the anger lay a deeper understanding, a shared pain that bound them together even as it threatened to tear them apart. "Then help us," Tom said, his voice softer now, echoing the vulnerability he felt. "Help us find out what really happened. We need to work together to uncover the truth." As Jake met his gaze, something shifted in his expression. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, determination igniting within him. "For Michael." With that, the room felt alive with possibility, each of them standing on the precipice of an uncertain future. The path ahead promised danger, but also the chance for redemption. As they prepared to face the darkness that had claimed Michael, Tom felt the weight of loyalty and love binding them together. They were no longer just brothers. They were allies in a battle against the shadows that threatened to consume them. With Max by their side, they would uncover the truth, fighting not just for Michael's legacy, but for the bond that had once defined their family. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but together, they would rise against the tide of darkness, ready to reclaim their lives and honor the memory of the brother they had lost. As Tom stepped forward into the unknown, he could feel the fire of determination burning within him. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, and no matter the cost, they would fight for it, together. As the tension in the room reached a boiling point, Tom felt a surge of determination flood through him. They had gathered here, not just to confront Jake, but to uncover the truth about Michael's death and the sinister web of deceit surrounding it. "Jake," Tom said, his voice steadier now, "we need to start from the beginning. What was Michael really working on? We found evidence of corruption linked to David, but your name was on that list too. Why?" Jake's face paled further, and he glanced at the officers, as if searching for an escape. "I swear I didn't know." But beneath the surface of Jake's panic, Tom detected a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "This is our chance, Jake. We can't let Michael's death be in vain. If you know something, now is the time to speak." Jake hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, he seemed to deflate, shoulders slumping as he looked directly at Tom. "Michael was working on a series of paintings that exposed the town's darker side," Jake confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was trying to capture the truth behind the facade, how some of the local businesses were involved in illegal activities, including money laundering and bribery. I thought it was just art, a form of expression, but I didn't realize how dangerous it was until it was too late." Tom's heart raced as the pieces began to fall into place. "And you didn't think to come to me? You could have warned him." "I thought he could handle it," Jake said, anguish lacing his voice. "He was always so confident in his work. But when I heard about the threats, I froze. I didn't know how to help." A sudden realization struck Tom, sending a chill down his spine. The last piece he was working on, the one that disappeared before his death. It was something big, wasn't it? Jake nodded, his expression a mixture of shame and sorrow. He had been gathering evidence, connecting the dots between local businesses and David's operation. He was going to unveil it at the gallery opening. "I thought it would be a breakthrough for him, a chance to finally gain recognition. I didn't think it would lead to this. Michael was trying to expose David, Tom whispered, the weight of understanding settling heavily on his shoulders. But you knew this. You had to have known that it would put him in danger. I didn't think it would go this far. Jake replied, desperation flooding his voice. I thought it would just be a few whispers. I never thought they'd actually want to kill him. Max growled softly, sensing the turmoil in the room. Tom knelt beside him, feeling the warmth and loyalty radiating from the dog. And when Michael confided in you about the threats, why didn't you take it seriously? I thought it was just paranoia, Jake admitted, anguish etched on his face. I thought I could talk him down, convince him to back off. I didn't realize he was in real danger until it was too late. Tom's heart ached, not just for his brother, but for the betrayal that had taken root in their family. And David? What's his connection? Why was he so intent on silencing Michael? Jake's gaze hardened, and he swallowed hard. David was worried about what Michael could reveal. He's been involved in shady dealings for years, and when he caught wind of what Michael was working on, he couldn't let it go public. He'd do anything to protect himself. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with the weight of newfound understanding. Tom turned to the officers, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. We have to act fast. If David finds out we're onto him, he'll do everything in his power to silence us. As the officers moved to secure the area, Jake's expression shifted from desperation to determination. I'll help you, whatever it takes. We need to make sure Michael's work doesn't die with him. Tom felt a surge of gratitude mixed with anger, the complexities of family loyalty swirling within him. They were standing on the precipice of a storm, but together, they would confront it. With Max at their side, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to unveil the truth behind the shadows that had claimed Michael's life. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since Michael's death, Tom felt a glimmer of hope. As they prepared to face David and the corruption that had seeped into their town, Tom understood that they were not just fighting for justice. They were fighting for Michael's legacy, one that would not be lost to the darkness. Together, they would reclaim the truth, and with it, the very essence of who they were as a family. The night was alive with possibility, and amid the chaos, their resolve burned brighter than ever. Together, they would shine a light into the darkness. The tension in the police station had reached a fever pitch as Tom, Sarah, Jake, and Officer Daniels gathered around a table strewn with Michael's documents. They had just laid out the evidence of corruption that had threatened to consume not just Michael but their entire town. The weight of the truth hung heavily in the air, a palpable force that seemed to solidify their purpose. Tom, we need to act fast, Officer Daniels said, his voice steady as he reviewed the evidence. We'll need to organize a team to confront David. He won't take kindly to this. Tom nodded, his heart racing. I know, but we need to do it carefully. If David finds out we're onto him, he won't hesitate to silence us. Jake's face was pale, a mixture of guilt and resolve etched in every line. I never meant for any of this to happen. I should have protected Michael. I should have listened. None of us saw it coming, Tom replied, feeling the weight of shared regret. But we can't let that stop us from making it right. Michael's work has to mean something. We owe it to him. As the officers began making plans, Tom felt a surge of determination. The fire ignited within him, fueled by the memory of his brother, the artist who had always sought to uncover the truth, even at great personal risk. For Michael, he whispered, the words a mantra that steadied his resolve. Max, sensing the shift in energy, sat at Tom's feet, watching intently. The dog had always been a symbol of loyalty, embodying the bond that connected them all. It was that same loyalty that now propelled them toward justice. Time slipped away, and soon they were ready. The officers armed themselves with the evidence, the truth a weapon in their hands. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Tom took a moment to breathe in the crispness, feeling the weight of his choices settle in. Whatever happens tonight, we'll face it together, Sarah said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Her courage steadied him, a reminder that he was not alone. The drive to confront David was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. Tom glanced at Jake, who stared out the window, lost in thought. The bond of brotherhood felt fragile, yet within it lay the potential for healing. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and each decision would ripple through their lives forever. As they arrived at David's property, the air crackled with tension. Tom climbed out of the car, heart racing, and took a deep breath before stepping forward. He could feel the weight of Michael's legacy resting on his shoulders, the need to honor his brother driving him forward. "Remember, no matter what happens, we're in this together," Tom said, his voice steady as he looked at the group. They nodded, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The confrontation unfolded like a storm, accusations flying as they laid out the evidence before David. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken histories and buried truths. David's facade of confidence crumbled as he realized the depths of their determination. In that moment, something shifted within Tom. The anger that had threatened to consume him began to transform into clarity. He was no longer just Michael's brother. He was a guardian of his memory, a champion for the truth. As the police arrested David, Tom felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of justice finally taking root. He had stepped into the light, ready to reclaim not just his brother's legacy, but his own. In the days that followed, the town began to heal. The news of David's corruption spread like wildfire, igniting conversations and inspiring change. They uncovered a network of deceit, and the community rallied together, determined to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Tom stood at the edge of the forest where the cabin still stood, now filled with memories of their struggle. Max sat beside him, a loyal companion in a world reborn. He thought of Michael and the legacy he had left behind, not just in his art, but in the courage to face the darkness. Each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom would sit with Sarah and Jake, sharing stories of their brother. They laughed and cried, healing the fractures that had threatened to divide them. The bond they shared grew stronger, rooted in the shared experience of loss, love, and redemption. In the years to come, Tom knew that the scars of their journey would remain, not as reminders of pain, but as badges of resilience. They had turned darkness into light, just as Michael would have wanted. And with every sunset, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Tom felt a sense of peace wash over him. He would carry his brother's spirit forward, illuminating the path for others, and ensuring that the truth would echo through time, an enduring testament to the power of loyalty, love, and the unyielding pursuit of justice.